As you can see, networking is at the core value of what we do. Okay, so thank you for taking your seats. We now have the next panel, which is on the view from global industry leaders in the Galway MedTech and Healthcare Cluster. So the panel, as you can see, is John Nugent, Michael Gilvarry, Laurence and Angelo Gatto. You've seen from the programme who they are. I mean, the purpose, again, as always, is to understand what are the global sector trends, including the US, Asia and Europe, then specifically zoom in on the view from these leaders on the Galway MedTech and Healthcare Cluster. I think to start, John, from IDA, could we ask you basically to set the scene?
Of course, and is this on?
Yeah.
From a Galway perspective, is it on?
No.
Apologies. I'll try to do so from an Ireland perspective and from a Galway perspective.
Sure.
And probably,
well,
is that on now?
Can everyone hear John or not?
All right, Jim, you think so? I'm sure you can hear me, can you?
Can you hear John?
So from a Galway perspective, I'm probably more qualified from an Ireland perspective.
Ireland is good.
But if I look at setting the scene, I think the medical technology sector in Ireland, that's been here since, let's say, the 60s, came for a certain skill set, European access, manufacturing expertise and cost. And it's evolved through the 70s and 80s. Really, that's when probably Galway struck form with the cardiovascular, the arrival of certain very large cardiac-focused companies. And I think since then, what you've seen is Ireland evolve diagnostics, contact lenses, orthopedics, and other sectors nationally. But in Galway, I think the cardiovascular has probably been the stimulus for a lot of collaboration with the ATU, University of Galway, which has led to then the establishment of things like BioInnovate and spin-outs such as Neuravi, which I know Michael will speak about in the context of the Cerenovus and J&J story. And then people like John starting Erigen, an overnight success after 25 years in Galway. But I think it's really been a story of operational excellence, founded on pre-existing sectors, I would say, electronics, automotive, telecoms, those kinds of sectors which were transferable skills into medtech. And again, people will often point in a Galway context to digital and what digital left behind when it downsized or closed. But that site today probably employs more people in cardiovascular and medtech than it ever did in technology. So I think it's a story of evolution, and it's based on our strengths, and I'm really excited to see where it can go based on some of the things that David mentioned around sensing, imaging, and the future of connected health and other things.
Okay, well, look, that's a good start. Now, we didn't introduce IDA Ireland because most people know, but could you just tell some of our visitors from Japan what IDA Ireland is and what your role is?
So we're the Irish government agency that partners with global companies to give them a reason or a home in Ireland. We partner with them both in sourcing a location in Ireland, but also on the journey while they're here. When they're here, we partner with them on research activity, connections, training, sustainability and digitalization. So we are the counterbalance to Enterprise Ireland, who are promoting the indigenous companies to go global. We're the company or the agency that brings global companies to Ireland.
Thank you very much. And moving on to you, Michael, just set the scene. People know about Johnson & Johnson, but you're the general manager of Cerenovus. What exactly is Cerenovus? What do you do? How long have you been here? Do you want to just give us some context?
Sure, yeah. So Cerenovus is part of Johnson & Johnson, actually rebranded recently to J&J MedTech. So my third company name, but sitting at the same desk in the last 15 years. I really, a lot of previous panelists resonate strongly with me because I think we're very fortunate working in medtech. I trained as an engineer. I understand the problem-solving mindset. My wife said the same thing to me, John, about solving problems. But I think we're fortunate to work in medtech where the problems we solve have a meaningful difference to people's lives. And we work in the area of stroke. So stroke, there's about 15 million stroke worldwide every year. And of those strokes, about 5 million people will die, and another 5 million will be living with a permanent disability if it goes untreated. And in the last 15 years, we've been part of a very significant change in the way stroke patients are treated. 15 years ago, clotbusters were the standard of care. So it's basically TPA, a drug that's intended to dissolve the clot and restore blood flow to the brain. But in 2015, there was a series of clinical trials that we were also part of that showed that medical devices, so removing the blood clot through an interventional procedure, actually patients do better. So it halves the rate of death compared to TPA, and it almost doubles the good outcome, meaning that patients live without a disability
And could I ask you, because when we were preparing, we were talking a bit about the scale, and you've recently come back from China, and I get different scales of population, but could you tell us, for those of us who are not in the sector, tell us about the amount of dedicated stroke centres, say, here in Ireland and in a country like China and perhaps other countries you've been?
So, yeah, in Ireland there's about 7,500 strokes a year, in the US about 800,000, and in China it's between 2 and 2.5 million. So the procedure, it is kind of evolving in terms of the infrastructure that's been put in place, and on the back of these trials that show the benefit of mechanical thrombectomy. So in Ireland, for example, there are 3 stroke centres: Cork, Beaumont in Dublin, and Belfast, and that serves the entire population of Ireland. If Hildegard is knocking on the door, maybe that's a conversation that you can have with her about how the west of Ireland is served for stroke, but that's a different conversation. But in China, for example, they're projecting that there are going to be 2,000 stroke centres. That's compared to 3 in Ireland.
Well, clearly different populations, 5 million versus 1.4 billion, but nevertheless it reinforces the sheer scale of Asia. And you were saying as well that, forgive me, from the outside looking at Irish exports, be it indigenous Irish companies or global companies here exporting out of Ireland, the primary focus generically out, not just medtech, seems to be, high quality, high end, premium products. But you mentioned to me that within the industry there's a kind of a new term now, and kind of ubiquitous term that these countries with huge populations, and I'll give you an example, say Indonesia. I represent Indonesia, there's no ambassador in Ireland, I'm the honorary consul. It's 280 million people. We recently had a conversation about how they can roll out quality healthcare to 280 million people, and China 1.4 billion, India slightly more. But how does that work? Because they obviously want to roll it out in a much lower cost basis. So how does that work for companies like yours out of Ireland?
Yeah, so it's becoming, in medtech, anybody who's working in China, VBP is the...
What does that mean?
So it stands for value-based procurement. So essentially the Chinese government are looking at bringing these types of treatments to more patients. And from an economic perspective, obviously, it's a huge challenge. So they're really pushing the price of products down on the back of that, and it's across all of medtech. So the market dynamics in China are changing quite quickly. For us as a European-based entity, to get approval in China, you need to be approved in your home territory, so the country of origin, you need that approval first. And that's been quite a change for us as well on the back of the European medical device regulation, which makes it takes longer to get devices approved in Europe, and that in turn adds to the timeline to get approved in China for us. So there's a lot of market dynamics at the moment that we are putting strategies in place to work with those. Obviously there's a volume versus price kind of an equation. When you look at China, for example, it's a huge market. Anybody in manufacturing knows the more you make, the more you can scale, so you can have some natural gains that way. But we're also looking within China, so we have a China for China strategy where we are looking at some local companies that can get approved. We've recently signed a distribution deal with a Chinese company, for example, for a flow diverter product that's used in treating aneurysms.
And where? It's funny because you're leading us nicely into you now, Laurence. Laurence, when we were preparing KPMG, you've been here, 44 years?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, everyone knows what KPMG is, of course, and who, it's almost like a person in its own right, who it is. But You were talking about, the complexity of, regulation, incentives, red tape. I mean, how does that work in the medtech sector? I mean, obviously, when people deal with America, there's one regulator essentially, it's the FDA, is that correct? And it's more complicated, obviously, in other countries, etc. But just based on what, Michael was saying, have you anything to kind of add to what he's saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for having us here today. Yeah, I think the world in general is becoming more complex, as we all know, not just in medical devices, but across the whole spectrum. And I think when we think about or talk about regulation, clearly from a medical device or life science perspective, this regulation of the products themselves, but then also other regulatory regimes that are coming down the line as well around sustainability, CSRD, etc. So I think the complexities there are becoming more difficult, and it's interesting. That's what we're hearing from the clients that we speak to. When we look at kind of connected devices, is bringing additional considerations also. And so I think with the people we work with, that's what we hear, but some of that is anecdotal. You could say, is that a representative really of what's out there? So I think an interesting thing to look at is KPMG did a report in collaboration with the IMDA and SkillNet, where we conducted 400 interviews across the medical device sector in Ireland, just to see what were the key themes coming out of that. And for anyone that wants, it's about a 115-page report. I won't go through it page by page, but maybe just in terms of the key things that come out of it. And they looked at it from, I suppose, 5 spheres really, looking at RD&I, manufacturing, human resources, sustainability and regulatory. But in my view, there's probably 3 key things came out in terms of skills requirements. One was in the area of regulation and regulatory. Secondly was sustainability and the impact of that in terms of from sustainable supply chains, and what customers are looking for and what the regulations look for. And thirdly then was the impact of technology. And technology was across the 3 areas really. It wasn't just looking at any one of them. All were impacted by that, and technological advancements, manufacturing, AI. There's a lot of talk about the impact of AI in general, but how is it going to really impact it, or any use cases and everything. So I think it is becoming more complex, and I think the requirement then as a result of that for companies is having the workforce that have the skill sets to help them navigate through that complexity, and I think that's a challenge.
Okay, well, as John was saying, Ireland, of course, is a global, it's a global medtech hub, and as our previous speaker said, that Dublin is the satellite of Galway within this Team Ireland brand. Sorry, we're just having fun with this. But can I ask you then, do medtech companies, Michael, you might ask, do you use RegTech to automate the regulatory procedures?
Regulation is changing all of the time.
Indeed.
Europe probably was the biggest, change that we've seen, and we would have partnered with the Irish MedTech Association closely and through our own government affairs to I suppose really highlight some of the challenges that brings. So for example, 10 years ago the sequence of approvals was Europe first, and Europe really was where innovation started and where these products were getting used in patients. Second was US, third Japan, fourth China. So that was the kind of sequence of approvals. But that's changed. Now it's US first, China second, Japan second, Europe third, and US fourth. And it's I guess it's engaging, with the authorities to realise the impact that this can have on patients long term.
How does the Irish, what's it called, the Health Product Regulatory Authorities, the HPRA, how do they fit into all this? Are they part of the European standard, or do you have to be separately approved by them, or what?
So in Europe, it's approved through a notified body, and then competent authorities, HPRA, so they oversee the notified body.
Right.
But it's all governed by the European device regulation, so everybody ultimately has to meet that same European standard.
And clearly that's very time-consuming, cost-consuming. So who actually do all this? Do you have the equivalent of regulatory compliance officers in all your companies?
Absolutely, yes. So the functions that we have on site to take a device from initial concept, where you're looking at an unmet need, talking to the doctor, all the way through to approval. It needs to go through a product development cycle, all that's controlled by regulation. So there are quality system procedures that we have to put in place to meet the regulations.
Forgive me now for keep going with regulation. There's a reason for this. Okay, so may I ask you, how many people are employed in Cerenovus in total?
So, well, in Galway we've about 120 people.
And how many of those work in regulation?
There's probably about 5 or 6.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty reasonable. Now, the reason I say this is that I was Ireland's first, in St. Alan's former Minister for Finance, I was Ireland's first Chief Executive of the Regulatory Compliance Officer Association. And at the time, this was, God, what, 17 years ago now, when AML was becoming a thing, and and data protection, and we wrote a lot of the advice for kind of GDPR and all of this. And what we learned at the time in the financial sector particularly was that quite a lot of it could be automated, which, with respect, I can say that I no longer work in this. The regulators may not have preferred that, but quite a lot was regulated. And now, with AI, a lot of, standard regulatory compliance requirements are already being done automatically. And that's not, is that happening in the medtech sector or not?
It's coming. I think
It's
the
a
regulation of AI is a whole other topic, because you
Sure.
can get AI to write a submission without data. If you go on to ChatGPT, I'm from Mayo originally, it told me that Mayo last won the All-Ireland 2017. So I think you can't entirely rely on it yet, but it's coming.
And are there opportunities then, going back to you, and I'm coming to you, Angelo, excuse me, but John, just go back to you, is there an opportunity for idea in this that we could become a global kind of RegTech hub, not just for financial services and fintech and all, but also for the medtech industry?
I think regulation is a tricky one. It's a necessary part of the industry, for sure, in terms of protecting.
I'm glad you didn't say necessary evil there. You paused for a moment. That was like,
yeah,
okay.
You could hear the cogs turning over. But I think the divergence of approach is the problem that I think companies see, or the flipping of the focus, as Michael has articulated, from Europe to the US, which is the reverse of what it was years ago. There's definitely a role. I mean, we've such an industry here. When you have the industry that's here, it's such an interconnected industry, from the startups that are seeking to drive that regulation, as Nuravi, now Cerenovus, was doing and continues to do, right up to the large companies doing research here, seeking to take those products to market. Regulation is a key component.
But is it a plus for attracting FDI? Because certainly, when I worked in the financial services sector, within financial services, Ireland was seen as a safe harbour. Yes, the regulatory compliance was robust, but it was understood, it was predictable, and that gave people confidence in investing here, especially with their boards in America.
Regulation is part of the message. Like, there's a business-friendly, stable, all of that sort of pro-immigration, globally outwardly looking country, and I think regulation is part of that, as well as the stability. But we are also proud members of the European Union, and as such, the European MDR is something that we, through our HIPAA and our notified bodies, have to live with. At the moment, I would say the regulatory divergence is a bit of a challenge for us, and it's possibly it's the divergence, I think, is the issue in what is a global industry, and I think that's something that you're starting to see some articulation of that concern coming through Europe and other places. So for the moment, I wouldn't necessarily see regulation as an advantage the way it is, but we do have an unblemished regulatory record. So, operational excellence and regulation are core to what the medtech industry in Ireland does. The divergence of the approach between Europe and the US is not helpful at the moment.
No, never is what's saying that protection, but a different story, as you say. Okay, thank you so much, guys. We're going to move on to Angelo Gatto, and with your permission, Angelo, I'm going to, if it's okay, I'll introduce your company and then over to you to get straight into questions, because for me, one of the fascinating things about this event was to learn about Chanel Pharma. I didn't know about Chanel Pharma. I apologize, I didn't know about it. And from the information you've given us, if it's okay, excuse me, it says, Chanel Pharma is Ireland's largest manufacturer of generic pharmaceuticals for human and animal health. Its global supply chain and distribution network exports to over 80 countries. In February 2024, Chanel Pharma was acquired by Exponent PE, a leading European private equity firm. In 1995, Chanel established its vet distribution partnership in Asia Pacific. Our medical arm is also proud to have been trading in Australia since 2010. Chanel is known for its R&D excellence and end-to-end solutions from process development to commercial supply. Our deep understanding of Asia-Pacific economies, combined with our extensive international experience, makes Chanel a valuable and trusted partner to produce high-quality products and to support our customers' growth plans. I feel like I'm an ambassador for you as well now. And in terms of your background, Angelo, you were appointed as CEO of Chanel Pharma just in August this year. Congratulations. But you've 25 years of international experience in pharmaceuticals. So to change the discussion slightly, can I ask you, what are the key global trends you're now witnessing for the pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, with pleasure. Does it work? First of all, before I come to the question, actually I was surprised, on the other hand, how well known Chanel is. It's a surprise. Of course, I know Chanel since 15 years because I was in the industry, so business relationship with the previous owner, Michael Group, who's from the luxury area, and a successful entrepreneur that he established from scratch this business. And so I live on, since August, I live in Earls Island, 300 meters from here. So honestly, it's very local, but I would say even outside the country and in Ireland, perhaps because I am in the sector, but Chanel is well known. Actually, I don't remember if you mentioned that, but it's the biggest indigenous pharmaceutical company for animal health and human health. So that is something that even I didn't know. So I started my career actually in Johnson & Johnson Medical, 26 years ago. So I enjoyed being part of the MedTech, and then I worked for Pfizer, and so I went all through this, the big pharma, and now I'm in this, I would say, for the moment, Irish company, well known, but selling in more than 80 countries. So it's a global player from Ireland, where I think Irish people are very proud of Ireland, and I fully understand, and I feel somehow like Irish adopted now. I think you should be proud of that. Thank you for that. But what I mean is that it's not that obvious. It's not that obvious that you have more than 50 billion of pharmaceutical business in Ireland, which is, I guess, 50% of the country. I come from another country, which is Italy, which is of course different in size and proportion. Not as pharmaceutical as Ireland, but is the most successful country in Europe for pharmaceuticals, manufacturing and generation of value. So I can somehow compare now the success of Ireland to Italy, and it's all a matter of know-how, people, and how to invest in innovation and so on. And that could be maybe a link to the question. Okay? So the pharmaceutical industry is a healthy industry. It's paradox to say that, but it's growing, of course, following the growth of the human population. But there is also certain penetration because of aging and some emerging diseases, and even so different needs, but also different value and different priorities in life. So there is also a change in the market. Let's say that the traditional issues that we had 100 years ago, like people dying because of infection, is likely no longer the case. But now, the problem is cancer, but the problem is also many other emerging diseases, and also the way of tackling this is different. So it's a bit challenging to answer the question, because the pharmaceutical world is so complex, so broad. So it will take a while to give you maybe some different perspective, because there is certain business that is declining, but penetration for others, And I can give you an example. If for companies like Johnson & Johnson, which is also very strong not only in medtech but in the Janssen part, the pharmaceutical business is only focused on innovation. Just innovative products and no longer really paying attention to products which are off patents. Chanel is the opposite. Chanel has been focusing only on genetics. So it has been an instrumental deployer of using, of the adoption of drugs which are cheaper, more affordable, okay? And that is the success of Chanel, which started with the veterinary and then it expanded to the human health. So Chanel is a unique example, not many, of combination of human health and animal health. And actually yesterday we were, it's quite fascinating. It's very comprehensive and complex, okay? And this is an opportunity also to make a difference in the market, having an impact, because I heard about the ESG yesterday with my colleague who is here today. We kicked off the workshop with the team, with the colleagues on the ESG, the sustainability, and we touched the topic of One Health. Okay, so One Health is an emerging topic because we need to make sure that we have an holistic approach to health, which is going from human to animals to the environment, and this is, the goal is to approach this holistically. Otherwise, it will be unbalanced. Okay, and unfortunately, it has been unbalanced. So why I'm mentioning this? Because this is a perspective that I think is emerging. So you need to differentiate in the industry. So there is no question that the pharma industry will grow, but the question is how, in which, from which perspective, in which segments, and so on.
And as you say, it's very broad. What I liked what you said about was making a difference, because John, if you don't mind me saying so, going back to Aerogen, some of the leaders who work with you in Aerogen, they work with very big global companies, and now they work with you. And I remember asking one of them, I said, why did you move from a big global American company to work with Aerogen? And the reason this person said was because in Aerogen we can really make a difference. That's the motivation. In the same way, why did you come to Chanel Pharma?
Exactly for that. So to look back maybe after a few years and say, wow, we did it. Okay, to feel that we can have an impact. Believe it or not, 2 days ago I met one of the worldwide leaders in the pharmaceutical industry to discuss about One Health. And I met this person in Horenhor. Okay, she wanted to visit me to discuss about One Health because when I was announced, I put the One Health topic in the announcement of Chanel, and that was a trigger. She insisted to visit me. And she said, wow, can you tell me what you're going to do in Chanel for this? I said, well, we are just at the beginning, but this is what we're going to do. And she went, wow, you can be quicker than us because you can have an impact. So this is at the point. So sometimes it depends on the people. So I was the chief commercial officer of a group of 6,000 people, and Chanel is not my company. We have several hundred people, so I prefer to have much more span of control of this company of several hundred people, and maybe to bring to 1,000 people, but with a success story behind.
And as you say, the speed as well. It's not just making a difference, but the speed and able to do so.
That is, I would say, the speed is by far the most important KPI. Okay, so lead time, time to market, responsiveness. That is making the difference. You can be even the most cost-effective in the world, but if you are late, so you lose. And that is important also. I don't believe so. I can believe that there will be more European-based businesses in the future, starting from Europe, but the reshoring coming back from Asia to Europe, I don't believe so. So that will stay there. Certain technologies nowadays are difficult to bring. If you go not with the finished products, pharmaceuticals, but if you go to the starting materials of the initial processes of the pharmaceutical ingredients. It's very difficult to implement this in Europe again. We are losing know-how, but we are also losing technologies.
And actually, you raise a very good point. And just to remind everybody here, because our world, because of our history, you know, we're Anglo world, we speak English, we have, 40 million Irish Americans, etc., 70 million Irish around the world, or people of Irish origin to some degree. But if the world were a village of 100 people, right, 60 would be Asian, this in context, 60, okay? 9 would be American, 14, was it, 0.7 would be European. In reality, and very soon, those numbers are going up. And if you look at global GDP, it's currently 40% of global GDP is based in Asia. That will increase. So in reality, certainly within our lifetimes, you could see a scenario whereby 75% of 75 out of 100 people in the village are Asian, and half the wealth in the village belongs to the Asians. So you can't ignore Asia. And you do so at your curve. Could I ask you, what are you doing? Because we don't have time for everything, I want to bring in the guys as well. What are you doing specifically with Japan? How does that?
So, specifically with Japan, we don't have a historic business with Japan. We have the most important project in the veterinary business is with one of the top veterinary, I would say the #1 veterinary company in Japan. Okay, and it's co-development. So we are developing a product together, and they will cover the Japan and China and other Asian countries, and we cover Europe, and this will be a joint project. Okay?
Excellent. So that kind of cooperation. Okay, we're literally 1 minute away from the official finishing time, but the prior panel went on 5 minutes, so I'm going to take a few minutes. We're going to have a coffee break. John, back to you. Where's the future? Where's the future for Ireland in this space? Where's IDA positioning? What's the future strategy?
I want to pick up on something Angelo said, which is it depends on people. I think talent and the focus on future skills is something that I hear constantly from our clients as they look to the future. They think about things like sustainability, One Health, digitalization, innovation, and some equipment and some things can help you with that. And ChatGPT might even get the winner of the All Ireland right eventually. But it really comes back to people. It really comes back to people to run the ESG agenda, to run the equipment in terms of digitalization, make informed decisions based on data, although AI and other things will help. So I think the future for Ireland is really all about the continuation of the development of the talent within the sector, but increasingly about the convergence of sectors. And again, that's what I said. David referenced the kind of miniaturization, camera systems and imaging, which has been a specialism, if you will, or a core competence out of Japan. I think you're going to see much more integration of electronics, sensing, camera systems and data collection from devices. Again, some devices lend themselves more to it than others, but I think the future is very, very bright, especially as you look at the emergence of the indigenous companies here applying information technology and data to healthcare. And then the presence of the large multinational companies, as well as the indigenous medtech companies. I think the future looks very bright for that ecosystem to co-develop.
Ecosystem co-develop in the future. That's excellent. Thanks so much. And then Michael, over to you. Michael, is there anything important you wanted to say or that I forgot to ask you as a kind of final comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess, being in this panel, it's kind of makes you realise, I guess, the ecosystem that we have here. The journey that we've been on from a small startup company, Gilvarry, through to developing a product, now part of J&J and scaling that. And this year, J&J took the decision to make Galway the global innovation hub for medtech and neurovascular, so we're just kind of building and scaling all of the time. But really, the reason for that decision was the availability of talent here, the people that we have here. We've collaborated from the very first year in Nairobi with ATU, the Met Centre there. We have collaborations with the University of Galway and other universities in Ireland as well. So we've built this ecosystem through those kind of collaborations, and that attracts. We average about one physician a week coming from all over the globe. They've come from China, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, US, Canada, to Galway to talk about unmet needs, about innovations, and a lot of that is built on the type of research collaborations that we've built, and it really enables us to think about how to develop differentiated technologies. So regardless of where we bring our products to the globe, we have to think about what's individual maybe to certain countries. The disease state in Asia could be different to the US, but it's really this global mindset of innovating, bringing differentiated devices that are ultimately making a meaningful difference to people's lives. And it's great to be part of that ecosystem.
It's actually a perfect way to summarize it. Thank you so much. I love that. Laurence, any final comment from you or response?
Yeah, just to build on the comments from the other panellists, I think I'd wholeheartedly agree with the talent point. Like I said, that future skills report from Skillnet and IBEC, I think is excellent reading for anyone in the sector to see what's involved. I suppose the follow on from that then is, well, how do we ensure we have those talent with those necessary skill sets? So maybe there's a separate panel discussion for some other time to go through that, but I think there's a number of things. Clearly the work that Orla and I see and Alma is here also, that in ATU and University of Galway do, is very important. I think the future of learning is one of lifelong learning. Rather than just people get their degree or their master's or PhD and then head off into the workforce, because as I said earlier, the world is changing at such a pace. I think people need to be continuously reskilling and upskilling as they go through kind of micro credentials that's delivered either by the universities, delivered by organisations like SkillsNet, etc. But I think the other side of it then also is Ireland has done a very good job historically of attracting an FDI through some of the tax incentives regimes and the general environment we have for corporates, maybe not quite so good for individuals. And I think there's a body of work there that needs to be done. The government launched a study and published the results of it there on the 1st of October in respect of the future of share options and taxation of those. I think that's important. In our pre-budget submission, KPMG, we had proposals around things like SARP, which currently really only applies to FDI, and could that be changed so that SARP could apply to Indigenous businesses also? That's a relief where if you've got somebody abroad with the organisation, you can bring them into Ireland and then they get a reduction on the tax they pay, but they have to be with the organisation for 6 months. So it really doesn't apply to Indigenous. If you were to
talk about that,
yeah,
I think you made a very good point that whereas big companies can commit their resources, there's so much red tape, the smaller companies and startups can't do that. So
Absolutely.
the whole need to simplify the incentives, simplify the red tape. And I suppose, just in closing this session, I'll quote the late Dr. Tom Hartman again, who was an engineer, of course. And Tom, because he was an engineer, he was always looking for solutions to problems, which was great fun as Asia Matters evolved itself. But he used to get, he'll forgive me for saying so, he's looking down at us, he used to get annoyed at this expression that people say in Ireland, because he thought it was only half an expression. Because Irish people, of course, were very proud to be Irish. Ireland does very well in a business context. And Irish people often say Ireland punches above its weight because of the quality of its people. It's a common expression here. Many people believe it. In the Irish language, it's a bit of a mistranslation. We say, we're stronger together, strength in unity. But Tom used to qualify that. He said, what's missing from that is Ireland punches above its weight because of the quality of its people. But only, what you're saying, but only when the right people work together with a shared future focus. And it's very clear here in Galway you have that, and that's why it's so successful. So look, as a Corkonian who lives in the Dublin satellite of the Galway MedTech industry, I'll now close this session. We'll hand you over to Mary, and thank you again, Mary, and your team for the wonderful support today. So we're going to have a bit of a break now, tea and coffee. Make sure you introduce yourself to people. This is what it's all about, networking, saying hello to speakers, others, exchange business cards. Hopefully you still have business cards, especially if you're meeting our Japanese colleagues. E-cards work as well, or connect on LinkedIn. That's where most of us are connecting. Relax, have a tea, coffee, water, whatever. We're back sharp at 11:30 and we'll wrap up then at 12:15 with closing comments from our chairman, Andrew. Can we thank the panel for this?